In 1324, a man walked into Cairo with so much gold that he accidentally destroyed the entire Egyptian economy. For the next 12 years, the price of gold collapsed, inflation skyrocketed, trade routes were disrupted, all because one person was too generous. This wasn't a conqueror. This wasn't a warlord. This was a king on a religious pilgrimage, and his name was Mansa Musa, the richest human being who has ever lived. Not Jeff Bezos, not Elon Musk, not even John D. Rockefeller at the height of Standard Oil. When you adjust for inflation and compare wealth relative to the economy of the time, Mansa Musa's fortune is estimated at over $400 billion in today's money. But here's what makes his story even more remarkable. Almost nobody in the Western world has heard of him. This is the story of Mansa Musa, the king who broke economies by accident, the ruler whose generosity became legendary, and the African empire that controlled more gold than anywhere else on earth. To understand Mansa Musa's wealth, you first need to understand the Mali Empire. In the early 1300s, while Europe was still recovering from the Black Death and struggling through the Middle Ages, West Africa was experiencing a golden age, literally. The Mali Empire stretched across an area larger than Western Europe. It controlled the most important commodity in the medieval world, gold. At its peak, Mali produced nearly half of the world's gold supply. But it wasn't just gold. Mali also controlled the salt trade, and in the scorching Sahara Desert, salt was worth its weight in gold, sometimes even more valuable. Cities in Mali would trade gold for salt on a one-to-one basis. The empire's capital, Niani, was a thriving center of commerce. The legendary city of Timbuktu became one of the world's great centers of learning, with universities that attracted scholars from across Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. Mansa Musa came to power in 1312. He was the 10th Mansa, which means King of Kings, of the Mali Empire, and he inherited an already wealthy kingdom. But Mansa Musa did something that transformed Mali from rich to incomprehensibly wealthy. He expanded the empire. He annexed 24 cities. He brought the salt-producing city of Tagaza under his control. He dominated the trans-Saharan trade routes. Under his rule, Mali grew to over 2,000 miles across, about the distance from New York to Las Vegas. The empire included parts of what we now call Mauritania, Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Burkina Faso, Mali, Nigeria, and Chad. Mansa Musa wasn't just sitting on gold mines. He controlled the entire supply chain, mining, refining, and distribution. He was essentially the CEO of medieval Africa's gold industry. But in 1324, Mansa Musa decided to do something that would change history. He would make the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca that every able-bodied Muslim is supposed to make at least once in their lifetime. What happened next would reveal his wealth to the entire world. Mansa Musa didn't travel light. His caravan included 60,000 people. Let that sink in. 60,000 men, women, servants, soldiers, merchants, and scholars, all traveling together across the Sahara Desert. 12,000 servants and slaves carried his supplies. Each wore Persian silk and carried a golden staff weighing 4 pounds. 500 of his servants each carried a golden staff weighing 6 pounds. He brought 80 to 100 camels. Each camel carried 300 pounds of gold. That's 24,000 to 30,000 pounds of gold, or 12 to 15 tons. The caravan stretched for miles across the desert. It must have looked like a moving city made of gold. But the most shocking part wasn't the wealth he brought. It was what he did with it. As Mansa Musa traveled through Egypt on his way to Mecca, he gave gold away. Not small amounts, not coins. He gave away pounds and pounds of gold to everyone he met. He gave gold to the poor. He gave gold to scholars. He gave gold to officials. He built mosques and gave them gold-plated domes. He paid workers in gold. When he stopped to pray on Fridays, he would build a mosque in that location and leave gold for its upkeep. In Cairo, he met with the Sultan of Egypt, Al-Nasir Muhammad. According to historical accounts, Mansa Musa gave the Sultan 50,000 gold dinars. In one meeting, he was so generous that people in Cairo would later describe him as the man who flooded Cairo with his kindness. But here's where economic reality kicked in. When you flood a market with gold, gold becomes less valuable. It's supply and demand. And Mansa Musa brought so much gold into Egypt and gave so much of it away that he crashed the gold market. the price of gold in Cairo plummeted. Some historical sources say it dropped in value by 20 to 25%. Inflation exploded. The cost of goods skyrocketed because the currency gold was suddenly worth so much less. Merchants who had accepted gold from Mansa Musa's caravan found that their gold couldn't buy what it used to. Trade became chaotic. The Egyptian economy was in crisis, and the damage lasted for over a decade. It took 12 years for gold prices in Egypt to recover to their previous levels. Think about that. One man's generosity, not war, not conquest, not even intentional economic policy, but pure generosity, created an economic crisis that lasted 12 years. On his way back from Mecca, Mansa Musa realized what he'd done. So he tried to fix it. He borrowed gold from moneylenders in Cairo at high interest rates, essentially removing gold from circulation to help stabilize prices. It's possibly the only time in history that someone took out loans not because they needed the money, but to fix an economy they'd accidentally broken. But the impact of his pilgrimage went beyond economics. Before Mansa Musa's pilgrimage, most of the world didn't know Mali existed. After his pilgrimage, Mali was literally on the map. In 1375, a Spanish cartographer named Abraham Cresques created the Catalan Atlas, one of the most important medieval maps. On this map, sitting on a throne and holding a golden orb and scepter, is a depiction of Mansa Musa with the inscription, "This Negro lord is called Musa Mali, lord of the Negroes of Guinea. So abundant is the gold which is found in his country that he is the richest and most noble king in all the land." European traders and explorers suddenly became very interested in West Africa. Not for colonization, not yet, but for trade. They wanted access to that gold. Mansa Musa used his newfound fame strategically. He returned to Mali with scholars, architects, and books from Egypt and Arabia. He commissioned the construction of mosques, libraries, and universities. The University of Sankore in Timbuktu became one of the largest universities in the world, with over 25,000 students studying law, medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and literature. He expanded Mali's diplomatic relationships. Embassies from as far away as Morocco, Egypt, and Arabia visited his court. He transformed Timbuktu from a regional trading post into one of the intellectual centers of the medieval world. Manuscripts from this era, thousands of them, still exist today, covering everything from astronomy to poetry to Islamic law. But Mansa Musa also strengthened Mali militarily. He maintained a standing army of 100,000 soldiers, including 10,000 cavalry. He secured the empire's borders. He ensured that trade routes remained safe. Under his rule, Mali was peaceful, prosperous, and powerful. The empire reached its greatest extent. Crime was reportedly so low that, according to the Moroccan traveler Ibn Battuta, who visited Mali years after Mansa Musa's death, there is complete security in their country. Neither traveler nor inhabitant in it has anything to fear from robbers or men of violence. Mansa Musa ruled for 25 years. He died in 1337, around the age of 57. But his legacy lived on. For decades, Mali remained powerful and wealthy. Timbuktu remained a center of learning. The gold trade continued to flow. Eventually, like all empires, Mali declined. Internal conflicts, invasions from neighboring kingdoms, and the shifting of trade routes away from the Sahara all contributed to its fall. By the 1600s, the Mali Empire had fractured and faded from prominence. So why does Mansa Musa's story matter today? First, it challenges our understanding of history. For too long, the narrative has been that Africa was primitive or poor before European colonization. That's not just wrong, it's a lie. Mansa Musa's Mali was wealthier, more advanced, and more sophisticated than most European kingdoms of the same period. While Europe was still struggling with feudalism, Mali had international trade networks, universities, and diplomatic relations spanning continents. Second, it shows us that wealth alone doesn't define a legacy. Mansa Musa is remembered not just because he was rich, but because of what he did with that wealth. He built institutions. He supported education. He created infrastructure. He promoted peace and security. Compare that to modern billionaires who hoard wealth or spend it on yachts and space vanity projects. Mansa Musa's wealth served a purpose beyond himself. Third, his story is a reminder of how fragile economies are. One person's actions, even with good intentions, can have massive, unintended consequences. The economic crisis he accidentally caused in Egypt lasted longer than some modern recessions. It's a lesson in the importance of understanding economics and the ripple effects of our actions. But perhaps most importantly, Mansa Musa's story is a reminder that history is bigger and more diverse than what we're taught in school. There are countless stories like his, stories of African kingdoms, Asian dynasties, indigenous American civilizations, and more that have been ignored, erased, or forgotten. Mansa Musa proves that greatness, wealth, and power have never been limited to one part of the world or one group of people. He was the richest man in history. He was a devout Muslim who fulfilled his religious duty. He was a strategic ruler who expanded his empire. He was a patron of education and the arts. He was a man who accidentally broke economies just by being generous. And for over 700 years, his story has endured. Mansa Musa reminds us that there's always more to history than what we've been told. And sometimes the greatest stories are the ones we've never heard. If you enjoyed learning about Mansa Musa and the Mali Empire, make sure to subscribe. Every week we bring you untold stories from history, the empires, leaders, and moments that changed the world, but never made it into your textbooks. What other historical figures or empires should we cover next? Drop your suggestions in the comments. And if you want to dive deeper into African history, check out our playlist on the rise and fall of great empires. Thanks for watching. This is Beyond the Timeline, where the past comes alive.